Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. A bitch is back talking about books. Today I want to do my video on Once Upon a Broken Heart. I want to actually talk about the entire series because I started the first book. I got a comment and I love to listen to your suggestions. I love to listen to your comments. I love reading your comments, seeing all of the feedback. I really appreciate it as well. I got a comment asking to do a review on Once Upon a Broken Heart, and it was something that had always been on my read list. I just never ever got to it, and I always saw it on TikTok. If you know me, if you look at my channel, I read a lot of book talk books, okay? I think there are bad sides and good sides of book talk, and there's a huge range in book talk, so I could do a whole video essay about that. But basically, I have always had Once Upon a Broken Heart and the entire series on my to-read list, on my TBR. I just never ever got to it. So when someone asked for me to do a review, I was like, okay, this is the perfect time for me to read it. That was months ago, so I'm so sorry for getting back to you and making this video so far in advance. It's just after I finished the first book, I didn't think I had enough thoughts about it for me to make a full-out opinion and a full-out video on it. I decided to keep going. I read the first book, and then I read the second, and I read the third, and I thought, let's just do a video on the entire series as a whole. I really needed that, especially since the first book felt so incomplete. So let's just get into it. All of my thoughts on this series on Once Upon a Broken Heart. If you don't know what Once Upon a Broken Heart is and the entire series, it is a series of 3 books. They are young adult fantasy books, very much young adult, mind you, fantasy books that is set in a world, I believe it's set in the same world as Caraval, but I have never read Caraval. My review is coming from someone who doesn't know anything about the world, anything about the Caraval world, about this fantasy world. This is my first step into this universe. So if you've read the Caraval books, maybe you would have enjoyed it more than me. This is a little foreshadowing to my thoughts. It is a young adult fantasy book that follows a girl named Evangeline Fox. I would say the first book starts out sort of like a Cinderella story. She falls in love. It's so complicated, like how the first book starts out. Basically, how the synopsis starts out is that in book 1, Evangeline Fox, she is a girl with strawberry blonde hair. That's all I can really say about her. And she makes a deal with one of the gods of the world. His name is Jax. He is a person full of mystery. Nobody even knew that he's an actual being. He was always myth. Boom, one day she goes into this church. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies, a lot of fantastical things, a lot of magical realism, I'd say, even though it is in a fantasy world. But a lot of things just happen in this universe without a rhyme or a reason, and they never really give reasons for a lot of the things that happen. I think there's something beautiful in that. I think it's similar to, I've never read The Night Circus, but my sister says it's very similar to how The Night Circus is, that things are just kind of magical and you just need to suspend your disbelief a bit for a lot of these things. There doesn't have to be a reason why things happen, even in this fantasy world. So Evangeline Fox goes into this church and meets one of the gods, one of the deities, whatever you may call him, named Jax. Asking Jax, his hair actually changes color too. This is part of the magical universe. His hair goes from black sometimes, goes from blonde. We never find out the reason for it, but she begs and pleads with Jax to save the love of her life, to end his wedding with another. And that other person is Evangeline's sister. The love of Evangeline's life is getting married to her sister. After making this deal, Jax stops the wedding by turning them all to stone. And after turning them to stone, it's kind of this thing of like, be careful what you wish for, be careful what you ask for. Jax says if you want them to not be turned into stone, you can take their place. And she becomes stone for 6 weeks. And after she gets out, the curse is broken, whatever it may be, and isn't stone anymore. After the 6 weeks, the deal that she made with Jax consists that the idea that after Jax stops the wedding, Evangeline Fox owes Jax 3 kisses to whomever he chooses. Jax also has a curse on himself that if he were to kiss anybody, then that person, if it is not the love of his life, would die. Whoever he kisses will die except the love of his life. And he's not found the love of his life yet at this point of the book, apparently. Very, very convoluted, complicated story. This all leads the way to Evangeline basically is YN. There's a lot of curses in this world. She follows Jack's lead to go to the north, where she tries to date a prince and meet this prince. And all while this is happening, Jax is shadowing Evangeline, pushing her to do certain things that he wants, manipulating her to do whatever he wants. We do not know his motivations yet in the beginning of the book. It is all a mystery. Evangeline gets in the crossfires of all of that. The story goes from there. The vibe of it, I would say, is a lot of curses, a lot of very much like Once Upon a Time, the TV show. Curses and magical things happening, stories and concepts of storytelling. So I think the vibes in this first book is very much like a Cinderella story vibe. It's an ordinary girl getting stuck in between the chaos of the world and getting put in this area where she gets to go to the north, and the north is where the prince of the land lives, and the prince wants to get married, and she becomes in this like whirlwind kind of bachelor situation where she is vying for the prince's affections. It's also the same vibe because she has a really mean stepmother and 2 dead parents, and she has a stepsister who was gonna marry the love of her life. That's basically how the first book starts. Sorry if I couldn't really explain it well. It's just so hard for me to explain that. I don't know why. It's all a mystery. This entire first book is a setup, and that's how I saw it. That's why I couldn't really give my review on it. I would say it wasn't bad, but I also don't think there was anything amazing about it. I don't think the characters were super strong. Because everything is a mystery, I didn't really feel much for it, and I never got any answers really to much. The end did end on a cliffhanger, which I loved, and then you get into book 2, etc., etc. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't good, so I gave it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. There's just way too much in the first book that I didn't know, and there wasn't enough revealed for me to like the book fully on its own. I like the world. I like how whimsical it is. I like that it doesn't have to detail every single thing about the world and how things work. Things are just the way that they are. Although I also do think that the writing wasn't really descriptive enough when they describe the world in general. For example, what Evangeline was wearing, for some reason, they would describe her dresses, and for the life of me, I could not imagine it at all. The fabrics, I just didn't understand it. Maybe I need to do more fashion research, but when it comes to those things, a lot of it is not really descriptive. But overall, it was an okay book. And I will say this, overall, I gave the series 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. I was really, really hyped up, and everybody really loves Jax, and I wish I got the hype. I just think maybe this is not the genre that I like, but I love young adult fantasy. So I just think it's a book that has been done better and has been written better in a lot of other books and a lot of other situations. And I just didn't feel like there was anything special to it. I didn't think the romance was special, and everybody talks about the romance in this series. I didn't really have expectations going into it, but it also didn't really meet my expectations. Like, I just didn't feel like I fully enjoyed myself and immersed myself into the story ever the entire time I was reading it, because I didn't care as much for the characters. And I really feel bad about that, because I know that this book is really beloved. I know a lot of people really like this series and like this book, like the couple, like Jax, like Evangeline. Personally, I had to give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I don't think it was for me, and I don't think it was special enough for me to really like it. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's good. Let's get into book 2. So book 2, there's a lot of mysteries, still a lot of idiosyncratic things, and it explores more about curses. It explores more about arches and history going back in time. By the end of book 2, getting into book 3, the story changes so much. It feels like an entirely different book by the time that you get to book 3. So I feel like as a plot, it didn't really feel like one full linear story, because they just went a whole different way. And it's like by the beginning of book 3, spoiler alert, there's a memory loss thing. So it's like you have to relive a lot of things again. All of these books start off really slow, and kind of build a little bit, and there's just so much mystery in every single book. And even by book 3, you never get everything explained to you, which I think sometimes is fine, but sometimes I'm like, okay, you gotta explain some things, you know? In that case, it's just a plot hole. In all of these books, it starts out slow. You don't really care for it, at least for me. I didn't really care for it. And then by the end of it, once you hit the end, and it's like the last 50 pages, it picks up so fast. You wanna keep reading it and reading it. Like, oh my God, plot twist, that's crazy, oh my God. And then the book ends, and then it stops there. So all of this momentum it was gaining within the last 50 pages, you get there, and then the book's over. So then you start the new book, and you're so excited to read it, but then it has that cycle. It starts out slow. Then you get to the end of the second book, and you're like, oh my God. And then you gotta get to the third book, and then it's really slow until you reach the end. Didn't really like that about the books. I also just feel like there are a lot of plot holes. I haven't read Caraval. I'm reviewing this series as its own entity, and as its own entity, I don't think it stands up. The world and the world building is just not really descriptive enough, not really fully realized. I also think the characters aren't really fully realized. I don't know much about any of the characters really. About Evangeline, she was very much a YN character, a prophecy told, and the chosen one. We don't know fully too much about Jax's backstory. A lot of questions by the end of book 3 go unanswered. Also, this annoyed me so much, but if you have read the books, you will know who I'm talking about. But in book 3, for some reason, the end of that book annoyed me so much. Because tell me why they're all of a sudden, we are 3 books in, all of a sudden they want to include a new character that was not in book 1, was in book 2 a little bit, and was in book 3 a little bit in the beginning, but you want to include her at the end of book 3 to become a villain. All of a sudden at the end, there's this girl, that's as far as I'm going to tell you, who becomes suddenly a villain. But we don't know much about her. We don't care about her really as an audience. All we really knew about her was some of her history with Jax and Jax's history. Literally 75% of the way through the last book. Oh, let me just add this extra conflict that we can end the book on. But I'm like, we don't even know this girl. We don't even know where she came from. Why is she all of a sudden a villain? And we don't know much about her. We don't care much about her. And now she's disrupting the peace everywhere. It's not like it was a buildup of a character, a villain for the entirety of even the 3rd book. She just shows up at the end of the 3rd book and just so happens to be a villain too. Things like that where I'm like, the plot in these books really wasn't strong. If you've heard about these books, you know, oh, it's supposed to be about Jax. Everyone on TikTok's like swooning over Jax. I think he's a sweet person. I think he's a sweet guy. He's a sweet character. I can see why people swoon over him, but as a love story, as Evangeline and Jax and their story together, I just don't think there was much there. In the 1st book, there was one scene that they got where it's like, okay, you can kind of see them getting closer together. That's it. In book 2, there was really only a couple scenes when they're in the certain house. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. That's kind of the only time they really bond. And then all of a sudden, they've only had 2 or 3 scenes where they really felt like they were bonding, kind of getting to know each other. All of a sudden, by the end of book 2, they're in love. That just did not make sense to me. It didn't make sense that these 2 people were soulmates, that they were meant for each other, that they were the love of each other's lives. I just didn't feel like the relationship was strong enough at all for me to fully believe that as a reader. And because of that, by the time I got to book 3, it's more about Jax and Evangeline trying to find each other again, trying to love each other again. I didn't even see that you guys loved each other ever. You guys had 2 scenes where you kind of bonded and then a few scenes of tension. But throughout the entirety of it, I never felt like they were even in a lot of scenes together or they knew each other well. They're basically strangers by book 3. Even the audience, right? There's so much mystery embedded in this entire series. Evangeline doesn't know much about Jax's past, about what he's been through. Jax doesn't really know much about Evangeline. We don't even know much about Evangeline's home life. We totally forget about her parents by the time book 3 happens. To solidify and make the entire basis of the story and the romance into this couple when this couple is not really strong enough, I don't really feel like I wanted to read it. I'm so sorry if you loved this series. I hate to yuck on your yum, but I have to be honest, right? And this is just my honest opinions. I try to be as honest as I can on my channel, and that is just how I feel about this series. I don't think it was bad, but I also don't think it's good. It was just meh. It was just whatever. So if you want to read it and you want to form your own opinions about it, please let me know what you thought about this series. I just didn't feel like any of the characters were special in any way. Overall, what the book was missing for me was detail. For anything. Like, if you were gonna focus on the world building and none of the characters were really fully there, that would be fine. If you were gonna focus on maybe the plot, but like we don't delve deep into the characters and we don't delve deep into the world building, that's fine. Or if you want to get really, really strong characters, but no plot or no world building, that's totally okay too. But this book lacked all three. As a reader, for something to be sort of good for me in my eyes as a reader, you have to have strength in one of them. You have to have strength in world, or strength in story, or strength in character, or strength in writing. All four of those things, 3 to 4 of those things, this book didn't have any of them. I hate to say that because I know a lot of people do like this story and do like this book and do like this couple. I was thinking maybe it's because it's a young adult fantasy, but I love young adult fantasy and I've read so many young adult, like I grew up on dystopian and fantasy books. There's always something to gravitate towards in the books that I grew up really liking. I can say this about Marissa Myers, like I love every single thing that she's written, and I feel like in her books, the writing is just so fast-paced and the plot is just always, it's on. So that's what I gravitate towards. Sith, it's like the writing so good. The characters are good too. Any story, even if it's for a young adult, it has to have something. The entire series for me, I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. It just didn't have anything special for me to hold on to. Yeah, that is my review on Once Upon a Broken Heart. Thank you for whoever wanted me to review this book and this series. If you do end up reading it and you loved it, I will be so happy for you. And please let me know your thoughts down below. Or if any of you have read it, let me know your thoughts. I'm actually really, for this one in particular, I'm really curious to know what everyone's thinking if you've read it, because I just feel like maybe my thoughts on this one is just so vastly different than what a lot of people have been saying about this series. I just didn't really care for it. Haven't really found people say that they didn't care for it, because people were raving about it on Goodreads and people were raving about it on Book Talk and everything like that. So yeah, just please let me know your thoughts down below. I love you so much. This was a pretty quick, short review, but that's really all I had to say, and I didn't want to really put too much spoilers either in this video. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and my next book, I just got it in the mail. I'm literally so excited for this. Thank you so much for watching. I will have a review on Funny Story. I will probably do Bridgerton videos, reacting to those, and I will be reading this and reviewing this. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.